Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 47, and it's Thursday, June 6th, 2024. If this is the first time you're checking out the show or the content, glad to have you here. And if you're returning from another episode or some other content, glad to see you back. Glad to see you're still getting your fix of cyber threat intel. With that being said, if you need to grab a snack or a drink or something to get you through the content, make sure you run and go do that first before we keep going. And then also, if you want to access the articles that we cover in this episode, make sure to check out cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. That's the website where you can find all the articles we cover in this episode, as well as other episodes and other articles that we add in there that are also good reads too. So with that being said, let's go ahead and flip over my screen and hop into the content. All right, so first article, 4 arrested for allegedly attempting to sabotage Interpol criminal search system. International law enforcement has uncovered a criminal organization operating in Moldova suspected of attempting to sabotage a system that helps Interpol members locate and arrest wanted criminals worldwide. No! The suspects allegedly attempted to misuse the Red Notice system, the international police agency's tool for alerting its 195 member countries about individuals who are wanted for prosecution or to serve a sentence based on an arrest warrant or court decision. The suspected criminals paid, and this is a quote, paid intermediaries and public figures in Moldova to inform wanted criminals of their Red Notice status, said Moldova's anti-corruption chief Ronica Dragulin. Interpol also detected attempts to block and delete the notices. The detained individuals are also suspected of committing cybercrimes that caused millions of dollars in damages. The UK National Crime Agency, the NCA, also said that it uncovered the identities of key individuals in Moldova who received bribes from members of the criminal network. The NCA hasn't disclosed their names. So this is always interesting when there are these cooperations, these groups, these agreements, these special task force where a lot of different countries work together. Because even when we're thinking about, for instance, laws, so since we're talking about cybersecurity, when we talk about laws your organization has to abide by, that you have to follow or comply with, it varies between countries. That's one of the things that we talk about as far as who has control of data, where data is stored, for example, in data centers, those kinds of things. And so this is, a similar kind of thing where other countries than the one that you're in have different laws. Doesn't matter what country you're in, because you most likely don't have the same laws as everybody else. So it is interesting to see a country like Moldova where, I don't know a ton about the country itself, but the fact that whoever these criminals were able to essentially infiltrate or corrupt these different officials who had access to the system, and they could kind of take advantage of that, give whoever the criminals were a heads up, and even potentially deleting whatever these notices are in this system. I'm not super familiar with this system, but it sounds like this is what they use to kind of coordinate arrests and things like that to bring people to justice across all these different countries. So pretty interesting as far as that. It's even interesting to see kind of an insider threat, essentially, because this is basically what this is. And so this kind of thing could happen even in your company. It's not just the fact that this is a government kind of thing or government to government kind of thing. If you had something similar within your company, or you had people that were just able to be bribed, anything like that, that is certainly of concern. And that's why when you do things like going to work for the government, for example, especially here in the United States, they take extra precautions to make sure that you are hopefully not a bribable person. I guess there's no way to completely stop that, but it's always interesting to see these insider threats and kind of the psychology behind it, why they did certain things, why they were able to be bribed, how that worked, all those kinds of things. So fairly interesting from that sense. Next article, MetaBank is being sued by the privacy regulator, a move welcomed by former customers and cybersecurity experts. Health insurance giant MetaBank is facing a maximum fine, theoretically in the trillions of dollars, after the Australian Information Commissioner filed proceedings in the federal court over its 2022 cyber attack. Soon after the hack on health insurer and its subsidiary AHM, not sure how you say that, some customer data was posted on the dark web. The hackers intentionally targeted sensitive patient information, which included data about 4 people who had undergone pregnancy terminations, as well as many more names, addresses, dates of births, phone numbers, email addresses, Medicare numbers for customers of MetaBank budget brand AM or however you say that, but not expiry dates, so not expiration dates, and in some cases, passport numbers for international student customers, but not expiration dates. MetaBank refused to pay the ransom by the hackers, something the federal government said was consistent with official advice. And I've talked about this in particular incident before on this channel, on my YouTube channel. So this was pretty interesting when this actually happened. And also, too, something to point out before we keep going is countries like Australia are starting to put in regulations where you cannot pay ransomware attacks. So you cannot pay ransomware groups if you face a ransomware attack. Some regulations or some procedures are being put in place where you kind of have to justify it and get approval for actually being able to pay these different groups. And that's an effort to make it less appealing for these groups to go after different companies. I don't know if that's going to be effective necessarily, because that could cause headaches for the government to go through that and approve that process. Back to the article, it says the commissioner now alleges MetaBank seriously interfered with the privacy of 9.7 million Australians by failing to take reasonable steps to protect their personal information. It starts to get interesting here in this article. It says, we allege MetaBank failed to take reasonable steps to protect personal information it held, given its size, resources, the nature and volume of the sensitive and personal information it handled, and the risk of serious harm for an individual in the case of a breach. So I want you to think about this for a minute. This specific statement, so given its size, resources, the nature and volume of the sensitive and personal information it handled, so think about that. If you are going to be judged and prosecuted based on your size, because there's an expectation that if your company grows in scale, it grows in monetary revenue, those kinds of things, resources, staff, all that stuff, then you are going to be held to a higher standard than a company that does not have those same resources, or maybe is a little bit smaller and does not have the same capabilities maybe as you could. So they're not saying that, basically they're saying the bigger and more successful you get, the more effort you need to put in to have due care and due diligence in your organization. I find that very interesting that they are really coming out and saying that, because that is not always something that is necessarily stated. Certainly it makes sense if you are a large organization, you have more employees, you have more resources. Theoretically, you should be a little bit better at security, but we know in security that as that happens, as you grow in size as a company, things actually become more complex. And in some cases, it might become harder or more difficult to actually do even some of the simple things. Things like patching. If you have all these different systems that are running different operating systems, and there isn't standards across the board, or even if there is, you're going to have some differences across the board. And that can be difficult to even do things like patching. Some systems you can't patch. Some systems you have to wait for maintenance windows to patch. Sometimes you have to get approval to take systems down to patch them. So there's all these kinds of things that make it more complex. I just found that really interesting that they would say that. So again, interesting article. Definitely check it out. I doubt, like they said in here, the maximum fine, theoretically in the trillions of dollars. I don't know if that's going to happen. That is quite the substantial fine. Probably not likely, but I don't live in Australia, so maybe they could be extreme with their penalty. Next article, Chinese state-sponsored operation, Crimson Palace revealed.
Yes.
A long-term Chinese state-sponsored cyber espionage operation dubbed Crimson Palace has been unearthed by security researchers. Targeting a prominent government entity in Southeast Asia, the operation was discovered during an investigation by the Sophos Managed Detection and Response (MDR) team, triggered by the detection of a DLL sideloading technique exploiting a VMware component, vmnat.exe. It says the investigation spanning from March 2023 to December 2023, so almost a full year, not quite, just under. It says the Sophos analysis indicates that the campaign's primary objective was to maintain prolonged access to the target network for espionage purposes, including collecting sensitive military and technical information and deploying malware for command and control or C2 communications. So this is certainly one thing that we see with a lot of threat actors, especially the more sophisticated ones, is they might get into your network. They might be there for months. They might be there for a year, and you won't know about it. They're just going to hang out. They're going to observe. They're not going to do much. They're not going to try to exfiltrate a bunch of data and create all these warning alerts for you and things for you to investigate. They're just going to observe, and they're going to build their profile on you and their plan of attack based on how you operate. Maybe they'll do little tests here and there just to see what causes you to get alarmed and start looking into things. But generally, they'll hang out for a while. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind is typically when you get breached, you shouldn't just be looking at the immediate term. You should be looking at previous incidents, previous logs, a little bit further out to make sure that you're not missing something. Because also too, if you think about this, so obviously we do backups on systems, right? Servers, things like that. And if you're doing them, for example, every week or whatever the case is, every month, something like that, what if those attackers got into your monthly backups, let's say, 6 months ago, and you find out that they're in there currently, so you just restore last month's backups instead of looking 6 months back where they actually had infiltrated your network and compromised your systems? Well, then you're basically going to restore the backup where they've already still compromised it, and they can just get right back in. So that is an important thing that not everybody kind of steps back to see the big picture. They think, we got breached. This must have happened in the last couple days or so, last week. That's almost never the case, especially when you detect it. Usually they've probably been there for a little bit. So that's why it's so important that when you do your investigation, you do your incident response process and your lessons learned and your just your analysis of everything, that you make sure that whatever you identify, that you turn over every stone possible. Article also says, according to the advisory, the campaign's infrastructure and techniques overlap with those of other Chinese state-sponsored threat actors, indicating a broader ecosystem of cyber espionage. So again, I've said this before on the show, criminal groups that are connected, they will typically operate in similar ways, or they will have similar techniques, similar tactics, strategies, whatever the case is. They will have something that kind of connects the dots between the different groups. And then you can continue to build out your profile on those groups, and especially the larger group, to understand the full scope of what you are facing with that particular threat actor. And this is just the case with this. They're being connected to China. So with China, now you have this other group that you have to account for, and these other techniques or strategies that this individual group might be carrying out. Probably another group of people that are doing it. Might not be the same people. Maybe they have one person that's in both groups. Most likely not. It's probably a different set of groups. Especially if it's China, it's probably a different unit in the military or something in the government. That's what we see a lot of times. So always interesting to look at these different groups that exist. Next article here: Qlin ransomware gang linked to attack on London hospitals.
No!
A ransomware attack that hit pathology services provider Synovis on Monday and impacted several major NHS hospitals in London now has been linked to the Qlin ransomware operation. And is that how you say it? Qlin. Somebody let me know if you know how to say it. The attack has resulted in Synovis being locked out of its systems and causing its ongoing service disruptions at Guy's and St. Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust, King's Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, and various primary care providers across southeast London. There's a quote here. It says, "We believe it is a Russian group of cyber criminals who call themselves Qlin," Martin told BBC Radio 4 on Wednesday. Again, linking this to a specific country, nation state, group, building that profile so you can further understand everything that's happened. They're simply looking, and this is the quote, "They're simply looking for money. It's unlikely they would have known that they would have caused such serious primary healthcare disruption when they set out to attack the company." A lot of these groups tend to have this kind of moral compass where certain things are kind of over the line. So, for example, one of the things we see with some of the ransomware groups is that you will not go after life critical kinds of systems or things like that, life critical organizations, or in those kind of senses. So like hospitals, those critical like breathing machines and things like that, you are not going to go after those kinds of things. That's a no-no. But then we will also see them kind of on the flip side, they'll go for, whoever else. It doesn't matter. Or every group kind of has their own different belief system, really. Again, because different individuals or different people that are in those groups, so they're kind of, they don't have the same ideals as everybody else. It's just like with any normal people, right? A lot of people have different ideals, different beliefs, and that kind of guides what they consider right, what they consider wrong, what they consider acceptable and not acceptable, and those kinds of things. There's an image here. I'll let you read that if you want to read it in the article, but they give an image of the actual notification that they provide. It says, "Unfortunately, some operations and procedures which rely more heavily on pathology services have been postponed, and blood testing is being prioritized for the most urgent cases, meaning some patients have had phlebotomy appointments canceled." So they're prioritizing the different kinds of cases that have to exist, and that's pretty standard. This is kind of business continuity 101. But given that it's a pathology service, that it's a medical service, that can certainly not be great. I mean, sometimes you have to prioritize this stuff. It's part of business continuity. But in that kind of example, that's where the stakes are a little bit higher as far as having to do that. The worst thing that you could do is prioritize the different services in a kind of situation like that, and then it leads to something catastrophic happening for somebody. Hopefully that's not the case, and certainly with life-saving kind of things, those are going to be prioritized way higher than kind of routine things that people could theoretically go a week or longer without having done if they had to. Article says the gang has been linked to or claimed a steady stream of victims since its launch, with over 130 companies added to its dark web leak site over the last 2 years. However, QLAN operators haven't been very active until attacks picked up towards the end of 2023. Since December 2023, these cybercriminals have also been developing one of the most advanced and customizable Linux encryptors seen to date, specifically designed to target VMware ESXi virtual machines favored by enterprise organizations for their light resource needs. A lot of organizations use ESXi for their virtual environments, to host virtual machines, to basically make their networks more redundant. And obviously virtual machines are easy to move and easy to transport, easy to scale up and scale down. So there's all kinds of reasons why enterprises use ESXi. And certainly if you're targeting ESXi, you are targeting the enterprise. There's no other option when you're going after that, because typically, unless you're having a home lab where you're running ESXi, you're not going to be running that at your house. It's just not something that normal people are going to use, because it's not the correct use case for it. So that is, again, motive, or the audience, the target, who they're going after, because we know the kind of software that they're going after. All right, let's keep moving here. AI fuels rise in attacks from unsophisticated threat actors, federal cyber leaders say. Says AI has made it a lot easier for unsophisticated threat actors to create these attack scenarios, so different attack scenarios, NER said, so that they can go ahead and launch and play around in our current infrastructure. Speaking Tuesday at a News Scoop Group-produced GDIT event in Washington, NER and other federal cyber officials spoke of the proliferation of AI-fueled cyber attacks and how much more critical coordination and information sharing has become as use of the technology among amateur hackers has surged. Cynthia Kaiser, a deputy assistant director of the FBI Cyber Division, said she's seen a crop of adversaries who are becoming at least mildly better at their craft due to AI. Technology eases hackers' ability to perform basic scripting tasks and identify coding errors, Kaiser said, while deepfakes are leveraged in social engineering campaigns and increasingly refined spear phishing messages. As a beginner can go to the intermediate level, she said, and even the most sophisticated adversaries can be more efficient. So I've talked about this on this show before. I've talked about this before just in general, that this whole idea of artificial intelligence, well, for one, we've seen examples of it being used to develop malware. That's a solid case that we've talked about on this show before. We've seen that in several articles, several headlines. But that indeed is the fact, because you can go to these AI engines and you can get a lot of code for things. You can figure out how to do certain things, create scripts, do all that stuff, and essentially not write any code or write very little code if you had to. And that's really what this is getting at, is the idea that these systems are so smart, even for where they're at now, that they could theoretically be used to do certain things that we might not want them to do. And so the whole idea of script kiddies, if you don't know what a script kiddie is, or a basic level hacker, essentially the idea is that those kinds of hackers can just go leverage existing tools out there. So one of the things that we've talked about as far as historically is script kiddies will go download a tool. So they'll go download something like low orbit ion cannon was a tool that was really popular not too long ago, and could take down entire systems, networks, things like that, because it was a DOS tool, a denial of service tool. Now you have AI, where it's basically the same thing. Somebody with no scripting knowledge can just go ask questions of these AI engines and not have to perform any scripting stuff, not create any code. And it will basically do the same thing. It'll just spit out what they need. Now it's a little bit different because obviously AI engine, you can't just go there and say, hey, launch a denial of service attack against X, against whoever, which is good. That's a good thing that they can't do that. But it's kind of stopping just short of that because you can get all the code and everything that you need in a lot of cases. So it definitely raises the bar of even somebody who has very minimal knowledge. But they can go ask a question to ChatGPT or something, and they can just get an exploit or whatever it is. Article says the Treasury Department is especially susceptible to this onslaught of new age threats given its role as a federal government's sanctions arm, NER said, not to mention the fact that the financial industry is one of the most targeted critical infrastructure sectors. Absolutely. If you can go disrupt an economy or the Treasury Department of a government, then you can absolutely wreak havoc on a country. 100%. That's why you see things around, for instance, like the SEC in the United States and the market, the trading market, and banks, financial institutions, all those. That's why you see so much regulation in place, because if banks go out of business, if all that money gets lost, it's not correctly tracked. If the market itself is affected, stock prices, all that stuff. If you can mess with all of that, or the Treasury where the money is, accounted for and controlled, then you could probably take down an entire government, I would assume, if it was bad enough. But that's why you see so many controls in place for those kinds of institutions, because it's one that you cannot afford to sleep on and not do a lot of controls in place and really try to protect it. So that's the last article for today. Again, this is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 47, and it's Thursday, June 6th, 2024. If you want to see the articles that we covered in this episode, as well as other articles, head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. That's our website, and you can find all that information there. But with that being said, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Hope you found it informative and got some useful information from it. Hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.